Hello, friends. I hope everyone is doing well. There's a particular aspect of biblical living that I would like to address. A lot of people are going to disagree with this. I expect a lot of dissenting comments and arguments and so forth and so on, and that's fine. If you want to do that, you go ahead and do that. I would challenge you to actually look into what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to start with this statement. A biblical year is 360 days. A biblical year has 30 days per month for 12 months. And the moon cycle, biblically, is 30 days. Currently, a year is 365 days. And the moon cycle is 28 days. You know, give or take a little fraction in there. I don't know exactly what it is. Like a year is technically 365 and a quarter days. And it's not even exactly a quarter. It's, 0.2 something with a bunch of numbers behind it. But it's close enough to a quarter that we round it up. So every fourth year we have a leap year. So we have an extra day. So we have a 366-day year instead of a 365-day year. Back on point, there's so much dissent and argument about, well, this biblical holy day is supposed to take place here, and this biblical high Sabbath is supposed to be here, and, well, we do Passover now, and, well, we're doing Passover here, and there's steady, constant arguments about who's right, and people argue about the Enoch calendar, and this calendar and that calendar. Well, the reason that there's so much confusion is because there are two events that happen, and the Bible tells us about these two events. The first one is the long day of Joshua, where the Father holds the sun up for an extended period of time so that Joshua can wipe out the enemy before the sun sets, to give him time to you can go and read it. It's in the book of Joshua. There's another event about the, surrounding the prophecy of the birth of the Messiah. There's, in the book of Isaiah, the sundial goes back 10 degrees. Well, they're going to be, I know there's an entire group of people that are going to just disagree with me right off the bat. And this is the flat earthers. And, I'm not even trying to discuss or debate that. We're going to do away with that right now. Don't even waste your time trying to talk with me about it. But look into the story of Gulliver's Travels. The planet Mars has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. Fear and panic, actually, is what that translates to, because Phobos and Deimos, I think, is Latin. And anyway, in the book Gulliver's Travels, the Lilliputians know about those two moons around the planet Mars. This was known about before we had the technology to see those two moons when the book or the story of Gulliver's Travels was written. Now, the reason that this is important is because if you look through mythological history, Mars, the god of war, actually the planet used to be feared by people. That's how it got its name, Mars, the god of war, and all that, and all the mythologies. All right, so the reason that we knew about those moons back before we had the technology to see them, because their albedo, or, the light that they reflect, is so low that they're near impossible to see without the exact right settings of your telescope and whatnot. So the Earth used to orbit the sun differently than it does now. The reason that Mars was feared the way that it was is because the Earth and the moon used to pass the Earth and Mars, not the moon, used to pass each other so close that there would literally be massive land tides. We still have land tides today based on because of the gravity of the moon, the same way that we have ocean tides. There are 2 tides a day, 2 high tides and 2 low tides, I think. I'm not worked with it in a while, so I've got to go refresh myself. But we also have land tides depending on the phase of the moon. If you dig a hole during the full moon, when you go to fill that hole back up in the dirt, you're going to have dirt left over because the gravity has pulled the land up. So those land tides used to be a lot bigger, a lot more pronounced when the orbits of Earth and Mars were closer together. And when they would pass one another, if Mars was in the lead, it would increase the speed of the precession of Earth in its orbit and slow down the precession of Mars. If the Earth was in the lead when they, approached each other in their orbits, then the Earth would slow down in its precession and the planet Mars would speed up in its precession. So it's through mechanisms like this that the Father altered the orbital dynamics of the Earth, which has added 5¼ days to the year. You've got to look into this stuff. There's so much more to the Bible than just being spiritualistic and stuff like that. And I don't mean that in the pagan spiritualism way. I'm talking, listening to the Father, understanding his instructions for you to follow and all of that. The Bible is chock full of science. The water cycle is in there. It tells us about dinosaurs. Everybody knows about the Leviathan and the Behemoth in the book of Job. It tells us about, in the book of Jonah, it talks about a sunfish. And sunfish come in all different sizes. So the Bible is just so chock full of science that it's incredible. It's just that in my experiences, the vast majority of Messianic Torah observers lean on the I want to be spiritual and, lofty ideals and moral and all of that, and they ignore the practical scientific side of things. This is not a recrimination, it's just a fact of how people tend to be. That being said, that's why we have so much confusion and so many arguments about what happens when, and counting days and stuff like that. And so I asked a question on Facebook earlier today, and now I'm going to address something else. Paul said, when in Rome, he is as a Roman. When in Jerusalem or Israel, he is as a Jew. All right. A more modern way to say what he was saying is you have to talk to people where they are. So the way that relates to this question that I posted on Facebook, and I was earnestly seeking an answer, some conversation, so that I could be settled in what I was thinking it was. There are 2 different times of year that people celebrate Passover, and then, so many days after Passover, you've got the Feast of Weeks or First Fruits, where there's another Sabbath day that you're not supposed to do any servile work. And there's a function on the Google Calendar where you can go in and turn this function on, and it will tell you what the Jewish holidays are. But among the Jewish holidays, it also has the biblical holidays: Passover, Tabernacles, Pentecost, and all of those. Now, I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know the Hebrew names for them. I'm not even going to try to guess at them. It's too hard for me to pronounce that stuff anyway. I'm not very good at making those throaty noises. L'chaim. So my calendar says that today is the eve and tomorrow is the Sabbath. That's what my Google Calendar tells me. And it's the correct number of days from Passover. Scripturally speaking, if I start at Passover on this calendar and count the days, it's the right number of days. And that's what I went by. That's the calendar I used to I did Passover according to what's on this calendar. Words just aren't coming to me. And apologies for my wordiness and so forth. But, I asked this question on Facebook, and I got people, they keep coming to me, well, we're doing it on the 7th or the 8th or whatever. And, so I post my calendar up there, and I'm like, well, this is what I understand it to be. And it didn't seem like anybody was really interested in discussing it with me and, well, this is my reasoning for that. And, what is your reasoning for doing the way you do it and all of that. It was just well, this is what we're doing because this is what we were told it is and all of that. And I'm not trying to tell anybody that they're right or wrong, but start where people are. That's what I try to do. And just like the earlier part of this video, I'm not trying to argue. I'm not trying to put anyone down or make you look bad about how a biblical year is 360 days. As a matter of fact, to go back to that for a moment, there's, I think it's in the book of Daniel, and there's a bunch of places where it gives the end time prophecies or different end time events that are going to happen. And in the book of Daniel, I think it's Daniel, it mentions time, times, and half a time. Okay, well, that's 3.5 years. And, in common vernacular, that's the first 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. And, the first 3.5 years is a peace under the false, the pseudo-Messiah, false Messiah. Most people call him the Antichrist, but the fact is there are actually many Antichrists in the world right now. In fact, there were many Antichrists back then. It literally says that in the Bible. There are many Antichrists in the world. There's other places where it gives you the number of days, and when you divide those number of days by 360, it gives you 3.5. If you divide it by 365, it gives you an odd decimal that doesn't work out to be 3.5. It's like 3 point something really, really weird instead of being a straight flat 3.5. Times, and half a time. So the evidence is all through the Bible. I would strongly advise people to broaden your horizons, expand outside of the things that interest you. And this is something that we all need to do, me and everyone. I'm not trying to exclude myself from that. But most of us like to walk in our comfort zones, and we like to stick with the things that we're good at or the things that we think we're good at. And there's a Christian Bible commentator that I listen to, and he's passed now. I've heard him say in a few of his commentaries that the devil attacks us in our strong suit, and he does. Look at people that have a lot of money. They're arrogant about their money. Look at highly intelligent people. They are very arrogant about their intelligence. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, just two right off the top of my head. But the enemy attacks us in our strong suit. He doesn't mess with us where we're weak, because most of us know where we are weak, and it's in our strong suit is where we walk around with pride. That's the easiest place to bring us down. I don't remember the scripture verbatim. Pride goes before a fall. or haughty spirit goes before a fall. I don't remember. So really, that's just about all I wanted to cover. Is we need to stop arguing about all of these, how many days there are in a year, or no, that's not what we argue about. We need to stop arguing about, well, this is when the moon does this, or we saw the moon do this at that time. And, well, the biblical calendar, the true, accurate biblical calendar of the Father at creation was perfectly synchronized. 360 days, that is 360 24-hour days, 30-day cycle on the moon. 12 months, 30 days each. And the days at that time were also equal length because the Earth didn't sit at 23.5 degrees on its rotational axis in relation to the ecliptic. So you imagine the solar system as a plane, and the axis of the sun is tilted according to that plane. So when the Messiah returns, here's another scriptural proof for you. In the King James Version, I think it says there will be earthquakes in diverse places. Well, if you look that up actually in the Hebrew, and I have a Hebrew, Greek, English interlinear Bible that I use to reference these things, and I try to look the words up in the concordance and, kind of dig into the history of them and whatnot. That actually is not earthquakes in diverse places. What it actually is a worldwide earthquake. And this worldwide earthquake is going to happen when the Messiah returns at the beginning of the 1,000 years where he sits on the throne of David and rules the earth from Israel. And that worldwide earthquake is going to happen in part because the rotational axis of the earth is going to be set back to its proper angle, which is 90 degrees to the ecliptic. So we will have 12 months, 30 days each. Moon will be on a 30-day cycle, and day and night will be equal length. Anyway, I'm not the best at explaining these things. I've tried to do this in one take. I know I've rambled a little bit, but I hope that someone brings something away from this. In the meantime, study Scripture outside of what you're comfortable with. Dig deep, and Yahweh bless.